You are about to listen to a free portion of The Young Turks. To podcast the complete show, sign up for membership at tytnetwork.com/membership.
Hey everybody, welcome to The Young Turks. Michael Schure is back in the studio. You've not been here very often.
No, I haven't.
I don't understand why.
It's funny because I've just been in the office next door, just never came over here.
Yeah. And so you've been going around the country for Al Jazeera America.
Yeah.
You were in Wisconsin recently.
I returned from Wisconsin yesterday. Be going back to Wisconsin. It's where you are now. If you're following this.
Pretty important state.
Yeah.
On both sides.
Yeah.
You had said that you think that Ted Cruz is probably primed to do well.
Yeah, I think he is. I think there's a little bit of an Iowa model to Wisconsin too. They don't have as many evangelical voters, but they have a lot of the same type of demographic there, which I think plays to Cruz's favor. Also, there are three really important conservative talkers there, and they switch votes. I mean, people adhere to what they say, for better or worse. Charlie Sykes in Milwaukee, Mark Belling in Milwaukee, and a woman called Vicki McKenna in Madison. And Vicki McKenna, they've all been never Trump people. And that has had a huge effect there. And that's something that Trump can't do anything about.
Yeah. And he needs those delegates.
Yeah.
I actually just saw, just really fast, in South Carolina, there might be legal challenges to possibly take away his delegates because he's now saying that he won't support the eventual nominee, and you have to pledge in South Carolina, which he did in South Carolina, that you will support the person. Right. It would be amazing if they took those away. I find it a little bit hard to believe, but maybe it could happen.
You know what's really ironic about that? It was the debate in Cleveland. I think it was the beginning of September when that debate was. Maybe it was August. It was the 6th, whether it was August or September. And they wanted to make sure that Donald Trump, if he was not the nominee, would support the nominee, right?
Yeah.
Now, the whole issue is, will the people who Donald Trump has held to that vow actually stick with that vow? So he's not the only one backing away from it. And it's ironic what's happened to the party in those months.
Ironic and entertaining. Really fast, did you have did you get anything from the people that you met there in terms of Bernie Sanders or Hillary Clinton?
Yeah, I was covering Trump that day. I was in Janesville, which is Paul Ryan's hometown, and there was a Trump rally. And
he got booed.
Well, that was amazing. And I think that Trump was legitimately surprised that he got booed. So earlier in the day, I was doing a story about Janesville and how it's really a Democratic city. But Russ Feingold's from Janesville, Paul Ryan's from Janesville. It's a small town, about 65,000 people, small to some, like me. And the thing about Janesville that's so interesting is that there are a lot of Republicans who vote Democrat and a lot of Democrats who vote Republican there. So most of the people I spoke to said they're going to vote for Russ Feingold and they're going to vote for Paul Ryan when on Election Day. But that Donald Trump went in there and brought up Paul Ryan's name, thinking he was going to get some love because of where he was. He wasn't going to rip into him. He had ripped into Cruz. He'd ripped into John Kasich. Brings up Paul Ryan, he gets booed. I was surprised. A couple of the other journalists I was sitting with were surprised. And Trump seemed legitimate, like it wasn't a game. Like he wasn't putting it out there to, I'm going to boo him too because he's Washington. But that was exactly why he was in Janesville, was to take his act, anti-Washington act, into the Washington of Wisconsin.
Paul Ryan, fairly tightly tied to, if you don't like that establishment, that machine, he is now the head of it in a very large way.
Yeah, he is. He's the most powerful Republican in America.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so we obviously have a lot of news that we're going to cover over the course of this first hour. We've got fallout from Trump's abortion comments. That's going to be what we lead off with in just a few minutes. Interesting polling data on the views of the supporters of the different candidates on both sides. And we're going to talk about that, and we're going to compare and contrast Bernie Sanders supporters and Donald Trump supporters, although we have evidence on all of them. We have an interesting Hillary Clinton ad in New York that does not mention Bernie Sanders at all and is much more concerned with another person that's currently running, although on the other side. And, Mississippi. This is a story we wanted to get to yesterday. Mississippi is basically mimicking a plot line from Game of Thrones. And so stick around until the end of the hour and you'll find out what that's about.
What Game of Thrones is about? If I wait the entire hour?
Do you not watch Game of Thrones?
I don't, but that's okay.
You don't? Really?
I don't have time to watch television.
You spend so much time in hotels.
I know, but at I get there like 11:45 and I collapse.
That's true. Okay. Well, you're missing out. It's a good show. And the new season's about
I've
to
heard
start.
of it, by the way.
I'm sure. We do reviews here, actually.
I know, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so why don't we jump into the big story of the day. At last night's MSNBC town hall, Donald Trump got in a lot of trouble for some comments that he made about abortion. It appeared that he thought he's going to win over the pro-lifers with what he said. Instead, his supporters are now scrambling to defend him. Pro-life organizations are attacking him, and of course, the left is as well. In case you didn't actually see that exchange, here it is.
Do you believe in punishment for abortion? Yes or no, as a principle?
The answer is that there has to be some form of punishment.
For the woman?
Yeah, there has to be some form.
10 cents, 10 years,
I don't
what?
know. That I don't know. That
Why
I don't
not?
know. I don't know.
You take positions and everything else.
I do take positions and everything else. It's a very complicated position.
But you say bluntly you're pro-life, meaning you want to ban it.
But the Catholic Church is pro-life.
No, let's not talk about my religion.
No, I am talking about your religion. Your religion. I mean, you say you're a very good Catholic.
I didn't say very good. I said I'm a Catholic. And secondly...
I hate that ridiculous debate. Okay, why don't we talk about the Hindu position on abortion? No, we're talking about your position because you're running. Now, we've got a lot of people, some people defending him, some people attacking him. I found this to be so interesting, not just because I think that it could hurt Donald Trump, especially in the general election, but it made me think about abortion in a slightly different way and question some of the things that I had assumed, both about my own position and the positions of pro-lifers. And so we're going to get to all of that. First, obviously, there are other Republicans currently trying to beat Donald Trump. Now, they're going to try to imply that they have a very different position than him. And so we're going to get to that right now. Chuck Todd was talking with John Kasich, and they had this interaction. Chuck Todd says, let me ask you this. How do you enforce a ban on abortion? Because that's where we got into this punishment thing. John Kasich says, well, look, I think it's rape, incest, life of the mother, and you build some restrictions around it. But I think you have to be very careful in the way you do it. We're a long way from there. And Ted Cruz put out a press release in part saying, on the important issue of the sanctity of life, what's far too often neglected is that being pro-life is not simply about the unborn child, it's also about the mother and creating a culture that respects her and embraces life. Of course, we shouldn't be talking about punishing women. We should affirm their dignity and the incredible gift they have to bring life into the world. Because if you want to show respect to a woman, the best way is to stop her from doing something that she fundamentally believes that she has the right to do. I've always felt, maybe I'm old-fashioned, I guess.
Well, with Cruz, there's consistency. I mean, that's he talks about the culture all the time. The culture, however crazy or nuts you may think Ted Cruz is, he's good at his game.
Yeah.
And he's running, objectively one of the best campaigns I've seen in a long time, sticking to what, his message is. Lying about it, creating fiction about it, but at least appealing to the people he needs to appeal to.
Yeah.
And this is right there. These comments are right there, as crazy as you might think they are. So he is about the culture of it, and he does not talk about it in sort of punitive ways or in terms of the law and the courts. He wants the courts to change it because it's American culture. The others are kind of all over the place.
Yeah.
And
Kasich,
not that I agree, but
Kasich, we have to remember that not too many weeks ago defunded Planned Parenthood in his state. Extremely significant there. And as you're going to see a little bit later on in the show, Ted Cruz actually has supporters who are far more opposed to abortion than Donald Trump or even Kasich supporters are. Trump having the most liberal on that position.
But you should also, here's the other thing, is that, there's this whole Lion Ted thing, right? And this whole, but the Republicans themselves, all 16 others that were in this race with Donald Trump, none of them believes that Donald Trump is really pro-life.
Yeah.
And so when he says these things, they seize on it as an opportunity also to question that to begin with. And so I think that is informing so much of this conversation that people don't think about. They say, oh, yeah, there should be punishment. Donald Trump makes it up as he goes along.
Yeah,
and
he doesn't.
Really
he didn't know until that second that he was in favor of punishment.
Exactly. That's exactly right, Johnny. Yeah. So when he does that, it's also coming from the place when you see these reactions, Republicans who are irate over the fact that he's even saying he's pro-life. Yeah. Because they don't believe he is.
Yeah, and he's previously said that he's very pro-choice. He says, I am pro-choice in every respect. He was even in favor at one point, in favor of late-term abortion. Yeah. And it's easy to say, look, people change. You go through college, you do your philosophy class, and you change your position. But he was saying this when he was more than 50 years old. And it's not impossible to change after you're 50.
Right.
But it's a little bit harder to explain or worthy of explanation, and he hasn't explained that.
Well, others have changed. Dick Gephardt changed as he got older. He went from pro-life to pro-choice at an advanced age, I would guess older than 50. So it's not unprecedented. But when you change and make things up as you go along constantly, it's a totally different animal that you're dealing with. Yeah. And that's what pisses so many of these people off about Trump
Yeah.
is this changing on a dime stuff.
Yeah, and the other people, some of the largest organizations around this country that are pro-life are pissed off at him because he says that they say that he is fundamentally misunderstanding what their mission is, and I'm going to return to that in just a second. But at least in the short term, it makes them look really bad. And there were tweets from some individuals affiliated with those organizations saying that he had, in 3 seconds, undone 50 years of messaging politically to try to convince people that they're not against the woman, they're just against the dirty, dirty abortionist doctor.
Yeah, and that's why the pro-choice movement is ecstatic
Oh, they
by
love
these
this,
conversations
yes.
going on, because
Yeah.
it really does. I mean, that quote about undoing it is unbelievable, because it's, in a way, it's true. It's like, oh no, they called us.
Yeah,
you know?
you've rarely seen political framing dismantled as quickly
Right,
as that.
right.
We actually have a tweet from March for Life, one of these organizations, that says, no pro-lifer would ever want to punish a woman who has chosen abortion. This is against the very nature of what we are about, #pro-life. We also have pro-life Americans agree. The woman, another victim of abortion industry, should not and have not been prosecuted. So that's very interesting. Another victim. What I love about this, I want to get into the psychology behind it, because I think that Donald Trump, he's very rarely created learning moments for America, except perhaps about Islamophobia. But here I think that he has created one. Because these organizations are saying that they're not against the woman, they're against the doctor. But they also say that it is murder to kill a fetus. And yes, in the vast majority of cases, the woman is not the one who does the murder. But I got news for you. If you hire a hitman to kill your husband, you go to jail.
Right. Well, that's
doesn't
the whole,
matter that you didn't kill him.
That's the greatest thing about this conversation. It's like they're criticizing Trump for saying that a woman should be punished. Well, if it's against the law in your eyes, then everybody should be
Then
punished.
obviously she should be punished.
Yeah, exactly. If you're calling it murder, what, you're not going to punish murderers?
Yeah. Now, look, they might say what you see in their tweets is that she's a victim of the abortion industry. And so there's a very real chance that they don't see her as culpable for the same reason that women get a lot of disrespect from the right in this country, is that they don't think fundamentally that women are equipped to decide. Right. And that they may get an abortion, but they're just being convinced by the man or convinced by the doctors. They were just shopping for baby carriages and they got abducted by an abortionist, and they don't think that the woman fundamentally can choose for herself. But I love that he has uncovered this, because if you actually believe that it should be banned, then there has to be punishment.
Right.
And if you believe that it's murder, there has to be punishment for murdering a person. Either you believe that or you don't. And look, Kasich can evade it, and he did, and Ted Cruz can evade it, and he still continues to. These organizations can imply that they don't want the punishment. But at the end of the day, if it becomes illegal nationally or in these states, then there will be punishment, and they need to be intellectually consistent. Or we at least need to force them to show that they're not.
Yeah, it's almost embracing what these abortion killers do. The people that stand outside and kill, what was that guy's name? Who's can't believe I forget his name. He's the guy that killed the abortion.
Tiller.
Tiller, but there's another one too. Tiller,
okay.
But yeah, is who I was thinking of. They're the ones that are actually sort of putting their money behind what they're talking about.
Yeah.
In this case.
Yeah, that's
because
true.
If you're looking at it that way, as this extreme thing, they're stopping murder. Well, the murderers in that framing should, like you're saying, and like Trump is saying, in effect, have to pay a price as well. But the women, bringing the women into it is an amazing thing.
Yeah, look, you can go to jail theoretically for punching someone in the face. You apparently think that you shouldn't be punished as harshly for having an abortion as for punching a person in the face, which is fine. But you apparently don't think that having an abortion is as bad as punching a person in the face.
Right.
Maybe you think it's a little bit bad, but it's apparently not that bad.
Imagine if Corey Lewandowski had an abortion. Donald Trump would explode.
Exactly. Yeah. By the way, your hashtag Lion Corey was one of my favorite tweets of the entire year. But so they need to admit one of two things. Either they are actually in favor of punishing the woman, which is an intellectually consistent position that I 100% oppose, in which case no one is going to be on their side in America. They'll have 5% of America, maybe 10% of America, and that's it. And I believe that that's why they're not saying it, because they know that no one is in favor of that. Or they need to admit they don't actually think that it's murder. And it's kind of bad. They don't like it. But it's not nearly as bad as killing someone in a normal situation, in which case I think they're going to lose a lot of the next few generations of anti-abortion activists.
Yeah. Because
they're not going to be able to say you're killing people the same as other people are. You're just doing something that we think is kind of bad, and we'll punish a doctor, but we don't really think that the woman should get in any trouble.
Yeah.
And so, look, Donald Trump, if for nothing else, he has forced us to address this. And now, look, if Chris Matthews can do it to him, I want to see every reporter. When you talk to Ted Cruz or John Kasich or any other anti-abortion person, they need to explain why there shouldn't be punishment or if they actually do support punishment.
I suspect that's going to happen. Like, I think that
would be
that's
amazing.
where this conversation now goes, because the whole Planned Parenthood argument, and for that's how we've talked about abortion under that framework so far in this election. That might be past us now. We might now be going into the conversation about punitive abortion.
And Chris Matthews will be the one who took us there.
It's not where the Republicans want to be.
No, not at all. And of course, look, I would love to do a big rundown of this. I've seen some editorials that list some examples of this. But the idea, and you saw it in tweets from the organizations, we do not think you should punish the woman. Well, fuck you, because you guys already punished the woman in 1,000 different ways with the restrictions that you already have in place. We don't need to get anywhere near a nationwide or statewide bans. You already punished them financially. You forced them to miss out on work on multiple days in some cases. You forced them to do long waiting periods. You forced them to pay significantly. You forced them to have a harder time getting medical insurance. You forced them to travel, in some cases for hours, in some cases hundreds of miles away. You are all for punishing women. You just don't want to admit that you want to put them behind bars. And so, again, Chris Matthews and Donald Trump doing a service in having that conversation.
Well, and Chris Matthews, I mean, this is one of the things, I'm a Chris Matthews defender. I like Chris Matthews. I like him because I like politics. And the same reason I like John Madden covering football. It's just,
they're very similar in a lot of ways.
No, they are. And they're they say a bunch of dumb things. They just love what they're covering.
He said Hillary should have John Kasich as her running mate.
Well, I mean, whatever the case, he just loves it. He loves talking about it. He doesn't get tired of it. And eventually, when you're with someone who's conversing about something that you like, at a certain point, they're going to get, and he got this out of Donald Trump because he's just talking. And that has happened with Matthews many, many times. I know there are a lot of reasons, and there are a lot of people who sit at this table who don't like Chris Matthews.
Quite often, I do not.
Yeah, and most people.
But I don't hate the guy.
No, I just think you have to take some people not as seriously as others. Chris Matthews loves what he does, and he's talking about politics. So, I mean, I'm going to watch that before I watch the Golf Channel. And so I like that. And so he gets you upset once in a while, but he does, because all he does is talk, he gets other people to talk to, and this is what happens with him a lot of the time.
Yeah, and as we said at the time, if it was Anderson Cooper, we would not have gotten to that, because Anderson Cooper would have sat back. He might have tried to interject, but Trump would have said, excuse me. There would not have been a follow-up, and they would have moved on to a different topic.
And they play different roles, though, Anderson Cooper and Chris Matthews.
I like one role better than the other.
Right. No, I understand that, but this is meat and potatoes. This is what you want to sit around and talk about. And you just wish he didn't do some of the things he does sometimes. But,
That's true. Yeah, it would have been interesting if he had gone on to do town halls with Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders. I probably would not have liked those as much in either case. But I do want to move on to a slightly related issue. So Trump had his terrible comments about abortion. Most people, even on the right, a lot of people are attacking him. They're using this as an opportunity to say that he's not actually pro-life. He's saying what he thinks they want to hear, but he's showing that he fundamentally doesn't understand their messaging, if not their actual thought process. But that doesn't mean that he doesn't have his defenders, both his actual supporters and some in the media, especially on Fox News. So we're going to turn here to Fox and Friends, which has a pretty interesting excuse for why he might have said what he said.
He talked to Chris Matthews about nuclear weapons in the Middle East, and he talked to him about abortion. When you know a more experienced candidate, because Donald Trump was making $1 billion while everybody else was running for office, any other candidate, most candidates to this point would have said, I'm not here to talk about abortion. I mean, that's something that's not even up the docket. We're going to talk about it some other time.
But those are largely political questions. And given the fact that he's running for president, he's got to answer those questions. But nonetheless,
I'm pro-life.
He only became a politician about 6 or 7 months ago.
Yeah, which is why people like him. People like him because he's learning as he goes, and he's not the establishment.
God, all three of those people are so silly.
But also,
in their own way.
It's ridiculous. The notion that, and what that fool Kilmeade was saying, that the idea that any candidate, when asked a question, would say, I'm not here to talk about abortion. Republicans love talking about abortion.
Oh, definitely.
They're here to talk about abortion, Brian. So that's a ridiculous premise to open with. And then Steve Doocy, because people say something because they think that they have to, says, well, he's new at this. He's new at this.
Yeah, he's only a 68-year-old man who's been running for president for 6 or 7 months. Yeah. Why would he have a position
Donald
on
Trump
an issue?
ran for president in 2000.
That's a good point.
Donald Trump is not new to this.
Exactly.
I mean, he is not new to this. And he's not new to talking about issues.
And it's not about detailed tariff, like pros and cons. It's, do you think women should be able to exercise their constitutional rights to reproductive freedom?
And also, why the hell is it okay for him to be new to this here, but when he's talking about foreign policy, which he doesn't have a goddamn clue about, can he... It doesn't matter that he's new to this. We need to have better people with foreign policy. It's these Fox people are so hypocritical, too, about Donald Trump.
Well, and internally hypocritical. It wasn't that, like, oh, you shouldn't have to say anything just because the last thing he said was bad. That's the part that we don't like. But they're fine with him saying it should be banned nationally. So he's new enough that he doesn't know how long you should go to jail, but he's been around long enough to know that we should change established constitutional law for the past 4 or 5 decades.
Yeah.
That's a weird... And then the woman, of course, the woman defending him, I'm not familiar with her name. I mean, he's saying he wants to take away your rights, the rights of your friends. Statistically, it's almost certainly the case that she knows at least one woman who has had an abortion over the course of her life. He wants to take it away, possibly throw her in jail for committing murder.
Yeah.
But he's new. It's exciting. That's why people like him. But that wasn't the only Fox show that was supporting him. Fox... generally anti-Trump, but there are a number of hosts that are surprisingly sticking with him. We also have Andrea Tantoros. She doesn't even blame Chris Matthews necessarily. She blames someone else entirely, which you're going to see in this video.
He walked into exactly what Hillary Clinton wanted him to walk into, which is a trap that she can take and she can push out mailers and they can get their upcoming gender war, which is exactly what they want.
I love that, like, it's a trap. He said it should be banned. The natural follow-up is, what's the consequence for violating that ban?
Right.
That's a trap, okay? That's not him not having an answer or not wanting to be honest. That's a trap from Hillary Clinton, who wasn't even there.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, it's a stupid thing for her to have said. She is right on one point, which is that it sets up a gender war that the Democrats want and the Republicans don't. But that was all.
Saying
but this didn't set it up.
That's
right.
She doesn't believe that there actually is
there is one, right? And this had nothing to do with the gender. The gender war existed already before Donald Trump came along. He just happened to make it worse.
And I got news for you. Asking him how long they should go to jail or what their fine should be, that does not set up this phantom of a gender war. Saying that you're going to try to make it illegal nationally, that sets up the gender war. She shouldn't be pissed at Hillary Clinton. She should be pissed at Donald Trump there. And then we also have a supporter of Donald Trump who has a similar sort of opinion about who's to blame for this.
It's so far outside the mainstream, even pro-life thinking. Where did he come up with that?
Well, I think you have to look at the context and the situation he was in. This is a typical trap that a lot of Democrats, a lot of liberal media do when they ask this question amongst a pro-lifer, amongst a conservative. There is no easy answer out of it because it is a complicated situation, because it's a complex issue. And I think the fact that Mr. Trump realized immediately after he got off how quick going to be misconstrued and issued the clarification.
Well, hold on. Was it misconstrued? He said that women should be punished. He said women. I mean, he was clear about it. Not doctors, women.
And he actually, I think he completely misspoke, and I think he realizes he misspoke and did not use the right words. That's obviously not what he means.
If he misspoke, he was given the opportunity to clarify when Chris Matthews asked the follow-up question. He was very specific. He said the women, and then Donald Trump said yes.
But I also like Scotty Nell Hughes, who I met in Miami at one of the debates recently, that when she says it's obviously not what he meant. How is that obvious that it's not what he meant? How do we know anything about Donald Trump is obvious, what he means or doesn't mean? To me, it's obvious he is not pro-life. But it's only obvious to me because I don't think he is. So for
because
Scotty
we've read his other quotes.
Yeah, exactly, and there's a history to it. So these people that come to his defense, like Hughes, are coming to his defense without really knowing what the truth is behind what motivates
and not
him
caring.
to say something like that. Well, I think Trump not caring.
Well, they don't seem to care that he doesn't have a strong
that's
position
exactly.
that
That's
you can
right. I
read.
didn't know what you meant. Yeah, absolutely. They don't care as long as he's the guy. It doesn't matter what he says. And you notice that when you go to these. I think, Johnny, you should get out there and go to a Trump event. And I'm not kidding, because you see. It doesn't matter who's on stage, and it doesn't matter the security. It doesn't matter all those people. You look at the people in those crowds, and you see what they react to and how they talk to one another. It's astonishing. It's something you don't see in America very often anymore.
It's even more substance-free than most people in America are in terms of politics.
And it's also just
but
there's a
passionate.
blind devotion. You go to any other event, and I've seen every single candidate up close and personal in the past 8 or 9 months, and you see them questioning their guy or their woman,
or disagreeing with them on certain things.
Exactly. That's what I mean. And talking to us about, I'm here. Sometimes you have more people. You were in Iowa. People in Iowa they'll drive 340 miles to see somebody they're not going to vote for. So they're really into it, some of them. But the whole idea that they can question the candidate that they are actually supporting is fantastic, or doubt them, or disagree with them.
Yeah.
None of that exists with Trump. He could, whatever he says, they're absolutely fine with.
And I'm not very surprised, because psychologically, like many people have said, one of the unifying characteristics amongst Trump supporters is a predisposition towards the authoritarian personality, which is directly opposed to questioning the authority figures. And the final thing from Scotty's quote there is, she says it's a classic liberal media. It's a complicated issue.
She said trap too.
She said trap as well. So that maybe an email went out. This is classic liberal media tactic. It's a complicated issue, and you want us to say what the punishment should be? I do want you to say what the punishment should be, because you're the one saying we should ban it. If you want to take 10 years and go with a bunch of think tanks and work on it and figure it out, because it's such a complicated issue, figure out what the punishment should be, then push for the changes in the laws, then you could avoid this liberal media trap. But when you're saying we should ban it, when we don't even know what the consequence would be, you look like the moron, not Chris Matthews. Anyway, and look, the reason that we're talking about this so long, we've gone on for almost half of the show, is I think many people grew up thinking Roe v. Wade was so long ago. And I see in the States sometimes, in Texas, they've made it way harder to get an abortion, but they're never going to actually ban it.
Did you guys talk about Utah?
And this is educating people.
Did you talk about Utah last week, the anesthesia law?
Oh, yeah, we did talk about that, yeah, willing to risk the life of the mother to prove a political point.
Constant chipping away is what happens. And it happens on both sides. It happens with a lot of issues. None quite like this.
None quite like this, yes. Okay, let's move on to something slightly different. There have been some who oppose Bernie Sanders, whether on the left or on the right, who have noted certain similarities between his supporters and Donald Trump supporters. The single greatest one, perhaps, being an opposition to the established political authorities, although on different sides of the aisle, and believing that the economy is fundamentally rigged against them. But then there's this sort of implication that there might be more that ties them together. People saying that I've hung out at Donald Trump rallies and at Bernie Sanders rallies, and they're both just always so mad. And sometimes I can't tell the people who tweet apart from those two sides. And if you don't look at the actual data, you might think, in conjunction with like one poll that came out that said that some of them might vote for Donald Trump, that there are a lot of things that are unifying the supporters, which just seems crazy. When Bernie Sanders is tarnished as this crazy wide-eyed liberal, Donald Trump anything but we should assume that their supporters are very similar. Now, thankfully, Vox, who not necessarily generally big fans of Bernie Sanders, although they don't like Trump, have put together a list of some of the responses to poll questions on certain issues, and they've shown where the supporters of different candidates lie, and so it's an interesting way to compare them. So let's bring up this first one. You're going to see a wide variety of different topics there. I mean, things like whether immigrants are a burden on the country. Obviously, the Republicans' supporters much more likely to agree with that. And you see massive difference even amongst the supporters of the Republicans. Like Kasich supporters and Trump supporters are more different than Kasich supporters and Sanders supporters or Clinton supporters when it comes to their views of immigrants.
It's a lot of math, John.
There is a lot of math. Not too complicated. You don't need to do any trig or anything like that.
Your last word problem was burdensome. That was a burden on our country.
Sorry about that.
It's okay.
The U.S. Muslims should be more subject to scrutiny. We've seen quotes from Ted Cruz and Donald Trump about that recently. Huge difference between the Republicans and Democrats. And again, in both of these cases, Donald Trump supporters, Bernie Sanders supporters are the farthest apart. There's even, in the U.S. Muslims, there's a 10-point gap between Bernie Sanders and Clinton supporters there. Now, you do see...
I find it shocking. Are you down to angry with the government there?
I find that fairly shocking, too.
Yeah, that only 30% of Ted Cruz's voters are angry with the government.
And he's the Tea Party guy.
Yeah, he is the
Well, by the way, only
person with the
13%
government.
of Sanders supporters.
Right.
Now, granted, when they think angry with the government, they may be thinking President Obama, the presidency. And look, while Hillary Clinton has tied herself more closely to Obama than Bernie Sanders has, the supporters, probably the people who voted for Obama in 2008, are probably slightly more likely to support Bernie Sanders this time around. Because I would imagine a lot of the people who are supporting Hillary Clinton probably also liked her in 2008. But anyway, not that mad there with the government. And you notice, by the way, if we could just briefly put that up, this is somewhat reassuring. In terms of the Social Security benefits not being reduced, people are fairly consistent on that.
Yeah.
They don't want those benefits reduced. And that's why it's scary when either Democrats or Republican politicians imply that might have to happen.
Yeah, it's five. Yeah, all five candidates.
Look, and Trump supporters are the strongest against it. Although basically you're within the margin of error there.
But a lot of them are on Social Security too.
That's true as well. They do tend to be much older. Now, if we can jump ahead to this next one, you're going to see even more topics. Global involvement makes things worse. You see a pretty big difference, actually, between Clinton supporters and Sanders supporters. Almost as large as the difference more than the difference across the Republicans, actually. Free trade is good for the U.S. Sanders supporters fairly split there, considering some of his messaging, if not.
Yeah, that surprises me. I mean, it's a 10-point difference between good and bad with Bernie Sanders supporters.
Yeah, look, economic system favors powerful interests. Obviously, you would expect that would be the strongest position that Bernie Sanders supporters would take. Maybe something about money in politics. But Clinton supporters also largely agree with that, which is interesting. I liked this, by the way. Abortion should be legal in most cases. I mentioned in a previous video that Cruz supporters, they're the bright red there. They are way more anti-abortion than Kasich or Trump supporters. Most Trump supporters, by the way, don't seem to agree with him on his position on abortion. And Sanders supporters are 6 points more in favor of abortion legality than Hillary Clinton supporters are, which is interesting. Yeah. Although that might simply be tied in with them being more liberal in general. And then also government's responsibility to ensure all have health care. That's something that Trump has said, although his health care plan that he put out doesn't actually back it up. His supporters do not agree with him on that. Yeah. Only 14% believe.
But also, and going back to the abortion, Democrats, religious Democrats, regular church-going Democrats who are in favor of Hillary Clinton or in favor of Bernie Sanders Democrats, they are most likely to go for Hillary Clinton, the more religious Democrats right now. And they're the ones for whom abortion is not the number one issue. So that's why it doesn't.
And you might be getting just some like, because of the Christianity socially.
6 points, it's pretty much the same.
Yeah, it's not massive or anything like that. I just thought that was somewhat interesting. And so, look, it's easy to say that in terms of some of the messaging or the overall theme, I would say with significant differences, there's some similarity between Bernie Sanders' message, Trump's message, that the system is rigged in some way. But they don't even agree with the way that it's rigged, although they are both against money in politics. Their solution is slightly different. And their solutions to the other issues in terms of ISIS, in terms of immigration, obviously as different as they could be. Yeah. I don't know that this sort of information will put to rest the idea that they're basically the same people, these supporters, but it should go hopefully a long way.
And also, just because you have similar strains within them doesn't make them all the same. I mean, this whole idea, they both are sort of outside. I mean, Bernie Sanders has been in Congress, as we know, for over 25 years, but he is taking an outsider's approach to this race, and so is Donald Trump. So the whole idea that, there's that they can have some similar strains, but on issues and on everything else in between, they don't agree at all.
Not yet, almost not.
They're taking a stand against the way Washington is run, and that's you're allowed to have that. That happens in every election.
That's true.
That was Howard Dean and Pat Buchanan running in the same year. It just hasn't happened with the same kind of charisma just yet until this year.
And in a lot of ways, in a lot of the areas that they do agree, all of the other candidates' supporters do tend to agree as well. Yeah. I've heard a little bit less of this recently. The reason that it frustrated me was I didn't very often hear anybody on the right making the case. It tended to be, in my mind, people on the left who wanted a way to tarnish Sanders supporters. And simply saying that there's something like him, that makes it then easier to stick accusations of them simply being misogynists or simply being racist or whatever in conjunction with some of the other messaging that was going on in this campaign. I think they saw that as a shortcut to making those accusations stick as well.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
I don't know. That's speculation on my part. Nothing but speculation.
Yeah, I'm going to challenge your speculation, but you did say it's only speculation, so.
So I've escaped then.
It's all yours.
Yeah.
You can have
Some
it.
in Washington
you can own it. Own it. Right. Some say, while others.
Yeah. Right. By the way, I love that was Trump's first attempted evasion. Some Republicans would say it should be banned.
Right.
Motherfucker, I'm talking to you.
He's talking about his Muslim friends. Name them, Don. Name
them.
Yeah.
Although he would let the rich ones in.
Right.
Okay, so we're going to take our first break. When we come back, we've got a new ad. Hillary Clinton trying to shake things up in New York, where the race might be a little bit closer than we would have assumed a few months ago that it could be. And then we also have a response to the things that Trump said about his tax returns and audits when we come back to this break.
Your TYT live tweets today are on fire. Carl Blavelt, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, says, we have the hun, the bun,
oh God,
and the fun.
Hey!
All right, all right.
I was expecting like maybe something.
And the lesbian.
Yeah, it's like the hun, the bun, and a huge lesbian. I'd be like, oh, super, thanks, man.
No, I love that.
But I'm fun.
Carl,
God damn it, I'm fun.
I want to be fun. I don't want to be the hun if she's going to get the
Then you
be
probably
the fun
shouldn't
one.
call yourself Hassan the hun, you piece of shit.
I'm going to change it to Hassan the fun.
Yeah, Hassan the fun. Do it.
I'm fun, guys.
Okay.
I swear.
There's more that I love. Shit physicist says, leather jackets always look good. Fucking get it.
Yes.
Love it. And then we have your mama saying, I'm also getting tired of knee-jerk firings for ignorance. They need to start a conversation to educate. Otherwise, no one learns. Okay, so it's interesting because I used to be in the camp of fire her. It's unprofessional. Fire her, right? But I am evolving on this issue, not because I agree with her or I think that, she's necessarily going to change her viewpoints. But I realize that by just firing someone, it's kind of like brushing the issue under the rug, right? It's like almost neglecting the issue. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's important to give people second chances. And I think that she had a long, successful career.
21 Emmys, guys.
21 Emmys, and there's a reason for that. And what she wrote was extremely ignorant, and of course I disagree with it. But I think it is important to start a dialogue and have honest discussions about these things. I think there should be some sort of punishment, like maybe, hey, you know what, you're suspended for like a few days or whatever. But there needs to be a serious discussion had, Because, look, there have been moments where I've said ignorant things on the show, and Cenk could have very easily fired me, but he didn't. I remember one time I got into a huge argument with a woman about cultural appropriation on Twitter. I continued saying ignorant things online, and then I was like, what am I doing right now? I don't really know about this issue. I need to look into it further, and I learned through that, and that's important. So, good point, your mama.
Good point, yo mama.
Thanks, Mom.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching.
Annette says, but Annette disagrees a little bit. She says she used the tragedy to say it was black people, we need to fix the black community, which is in poor taste to say the least. I agree it was in poor taste. I also think we should have that dialogue. And Zinni says, just make the stalls have full walls and real doors and we'll all be fine, guys. Put in extra fans, we'll be fine. Referring to us literally inhaling the fecal matter.
No, but you do. I got a tweet on here too. Do you want me to read a TYT live tweet? I got it lined up. This guy was like, Hassan the Hun, you're super right. It is fecal matter that you guys are. I'm not really reading the tweet.
Fuck out of here.
But no, it said, Sean O'Neill said, alas, Hassan the Hun is right. Smells are particulate and poo particles are particularly off-putting.
So, but like, is it literally tangible?
Yes,
particles?
It's very small particles of poop that your nose hairs suck up. That's
some
literally
of us
what
have more nose hairs than others.
Okay, I don't want to continue this conversation because I don't know what the reality is, and I'm worried you don't know what the reality is. So, okay, let's just move on. Take what we just said with a grain of salt because I have no idea. Okay, let's move on. Minnesota is fighting to ban revenge porn. In fact, there are currently 27 states in the U.S. that have either banned it or have some restrictions pertaining to it. However, there is an unusual lobbying group that's fighting against the ban of revenge porn in Minnesota. At least they're fighting the way that this legislation is written. Now, that lobbying group, or that group, I should say, that is lobbying against this law is the Motion Picture Association of America. Now, this is the movie industry's major lobbying arm, has for what it's believed to be the first time weighed in on a revenge porn bill, Minnesota's HF 2741. At issue is a provision in the bill that the person who releases such photos or videos doesn't have to actually desire to harm the person depicted for it to be considered a crime. So this is really a question of intent. And what the lawmakers in Minnesota want to do is ensure that it doesn't matter what the intent is. If you post someone's nude pictures or videos online without their consent, it's considered revenge porn and it should be banned. Now, the MPAA worries that this could hamper the distribution of explicit but newsworthy material, like images of Holocaust victims or prisoners at Abu Ghraib.
Or Hulk Hogan's sex tape.
Well, Hulk Hogan's sex tape would be banned.
I know.
And it should be
that
banned.
was a joke.
And it should be banned. Exactly.
I was making a joke.
I'm bad at picking up jokes, I guess. But it's interesting because I feel like there are stories and issues where it's very clear that it's not revenge porn. So Abu Ghraib is not revenge porn. It was a news story involving our members of the military abusing people in a prison and abusing them as they were naked. There's a newsworthy element to that, right? It's very different from revenge porn. And the bill's sponsor said the following: this bill cannot plausibly be read as a threat to the distribution of constitutionally protected material of legitimate interest to the public. What say you?
I want to hear what you have to say.
I was going to say, first of all, I just want to start out by saying amateur porn is my favorite type of porn because it's real depictions of sex. Having said that, revenge porn is terrible and has terrible consequences. I've done many stories on this on Pop Crunch and other outlets on TYT. Mm-hmm. It should be federally regulated at this point, and it's ridiculous. And the steps that you need to take in order to get revenge porn off the internet is equally outrageous. And go check out my Pop Crunch videos if you want to see that.
Look at you with your shameless plug.
I know. I'm just going to shamelessly plug myself. Having said that, I do not understand why the motion... Like, immediately I thought the MPAA has to do something, has to have some sort of financial interest in ensuring that revenge porn gets
some protection.
Yeah, some protection in Minnesota. Because what reason would they have? Because the grounds that they stated are really weird. It doesn't seem plausible enough that they are trying to protect revenge porn laws, or at least trying to amend the regulation of it. By adding in that item of you need to specify that there is intent to harm another person.
Yeah.
I don't understand why.
Understand that when it comes to intent is a very difficult thing to prove in
exactly.
court. So the reason why Minnesota, or the lawmakers in Minnesota, are drafting this legislation in the way that they are is because they don't want cases like this to come to court and they're immediately dismissed because it's so difficult to prove intent. Mm-hmm. Grace.
Yeah.
Guys, I will be really honest with you. I'm kind of thinking about what Hassan is saying. I don't know what the play is here.
Yeah.
I'm very confused. I've read this article, I've read some other articles trying to figure out what possibly could the MPAA have to gain.
Yeah.
Because there's got to be a financial interest, and the examples that they're citing, it just doesn't add up to me.
Yeah.
So then I'm like, well, I'm an idiot comedian. What am I not seeing here? Because it seems so clear cut that they would want to protect the images of their, biggest hitters.
Do they have some sort of weird the revenge porn website that operates out of Minnesota or something?
Or doesn't? I think that they might be worried about maybe an actress who's agreed to a nude scene and then later she changes her mind, but they want to include the nude scene. I have no idea what their intentions are,
but she has a contractual obligation at that point.
She does,
there's
exactly.
so many different reasons as to why that will still be.
But maybe it's when these nude photos come out that it becomes, people talk about these stars more, and I don't know. This is kind of but think about it. This is kind of a gross way to think about it. But say that nude photos come out of a celebrity or an actress, and then we see that she's incredibly hot, and then there's a star. Yeah, there's star factor raises.
There's no way.
You don't think that happened?
No, that happens. Hold on, guys. Hold on. At this point, all we're doing is speculating as to what their reasons are.
And specifically for Minnesota, understand that this is only a precedent being set forward in Minnesota. It's already in 27 states. It's not federal. But why would they specifically protect Minnesota?
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. Everything else makes sense. I even kind of understand the clauses they're trying to put in there if you want to think that every judge is going to immediately be like, oh, well, there's the precedent. Sorry. No more Schindler's List. Like, oh, that's, you know.
So I could understand if this was the lobbying arm of, like, let's say broadcast journalists, and they want to air stories involving, look, we did the Trump story where one 15-year-old alleged that she was groped, right? Now, we don't have surveillance of her being groped, but let's say a news organization wants to show that, or someone grabbing her breast, to basically provide evidence to the audience that that actually did occur. Would that be protected under this type of legislation? Because it's sexual in nature, you don't necessarily have the 15-year-old's consent to
post
it.
And it's underage.
And it's, yes, that's true. It's underage. So there's a lot of
area.
different things that play a role in that. And remember, when you're in public, you have no expectation of privacy. So that also plays a role. But I really don't understand what the reasoning is behind the Motion Picture Association's lobbying against this. I think
and also, why specifically Minnesota? Because this law is passed in 27 other states. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Unfortunately, we don't know because they're not necessarily being honest with what their intentions are. But I do think it's important to protect the privacy of everyone, okay? The Hulk Hogan story came out. I was disgusted by it. Hulk Hogan is a dude, and he deserves his privacy just as much as female celebrities or private individuals deserve. So
even if he's secretly a racist.
He's not secretly a racist. I think he's pretty
I'm saying,
open
now
about
he's very openly a racist. But.
Exactly. All right, moving on to something completely different.
But not so much.
Not totally different, though.
Not so much.
It's kind of related to our
Matter of
conversation.
fact, I thought it was literally an extension of the same story.
So funny. All right. A man by the name of Marty in Sacramento is so fed up with people engaging in sexual rendezvous in the park across the street from where he lives that he decided to set up some surveillance cameras and then report these individuals to authorities. Now, we have a quick video explaining exactly what he's doing and why he's doing it. Let's take a look.
This couple is getting frisky out in the open for any passerby to see. Afterwards, they adjust their clothing, then take off. Here, another couple cuddles, then gets behind the wheel and drives away. And these lovebirds climb into the back of their car. As things get steamy, Marty, the neighborhood watchman, actually confronts them.
I'm just a guy that is protecting my neighborhood and my family.
Marty, the neighborhood watchman, is secretly recording them.
Oh, God. Oh, so wrong. Especially when I saw Marty. I never had visualized him until this moment. I read that he was a concrete salesman, but God damn, he is creepy looking.
Okay, all right.
Well, he has to not actually. Marty isn't his real name. He has to not use.
Whatever.
His real
I want to call him Marty. I like it.
I think we can pretty much figure out who he is. Not that we should, because there's a right to privacy that I guess Marty doesn't.
There's no right to privacy when you go on local television. You're I'm taking pictures of fornication.
I'm trying to draw how it's funny how he's like, don't use my real name, but like, look at all these people I've been filming.
I know, but there's a huge difference there. Look, I don't want to get down on people who are into having adventurous sex out in public. Like,
it's the best.
Sometimes other people do it. I can't be a hypocrite. But like the one thing that I want to say is when you're having sex in public, you have no expectation of privacy. So someone can very well surveil you, and that's on you. It's not really I don't want to say it's not wrong for a person to film you, right? Because I think that the person filming you is wrong. They probably shouldn't do it. But you have no expectation of privacy when you're having sex in public. So if they're in a public park, yeah, you might get caught. And this guy, I honestly, like, he's tired of people doing drugs at the park across the street. He's tired of people doing wrong things. I mean, I don't want to say that it's wrong
I like that he's trying to clean up his park. I think that his intentions are good.
Yeah.
You know,
is it?
I don't think he's a bad guy. That being said, it still feels creepy.
Of course it does.
The whole thing feels creepy. But
is it?
I think that his heart is in the right place.
No, it's not, because he says, I video everything. We either offer it to the police to use as evidence against them, or we put it up on YouTube. And that's where it goes fucking creepy, Marty. Everyone in public is, yes, you're right, they can be filmed. But when you take that footage and you put it on YouTube, all of a sudden, that is illegal.
So you just touched on an important distinction, and I agree with you on that. If you want these people to get caught because you feel like they're doing something illegal and it's wrong, it's one thing to report it to the authorities. It's another thing to try to destroy their lives by putting it up on YouTube. There's no need for that. That's
just a story on revenge porn. Like, that's
I totally disagree with him putting the videos up on YouTube. He says, I have seen and recorded 50-some sex events. I don't know how many of
sex
those
events.
Sex events, Marty.
Man,
God damn it, figure it out.
This park is hopping. They're having just sex events left and right.
What's really funny to me, there's a couple different really funny things. One, the coverage when they're talking about it. This couple was fondling one another, and then they just drove off. It's like, whoa, they fucking fondled and then drove away? That's crazy, man. Like, what is that?
Dancing.
I know.
One couple was just bumping and grinding in the park. They didn't even need music. That's how in love they were. It's really rather sweet.
It's just, it's so weird and creepy. And why is everyone having sex outside of Marty's house? And also, if I lived in Sacramento, I would totally have sex outside of Marty's house now. Like, yeah, Marty.
Okay, so the point that I wanted to make is, I know that there have been parks in areas that I grew up in that had similar issues. So I grew up in Reseda, California, right? And there's this, there's a hill with all sorts of hiking trails, and a lot of people used to park up there, do their business, and leave. And so the residents in that area were frustrated by it, so they started putting up surveillance cameras, and they were being very transparent about the fact that there were cameras everywhere, which is important, I think. And then another thing they did to deter, illegal activity or, public fornication is they had cops patrol that area and make sure that people didn't do things that residents in that area didn't want. I don't blame Marty for not wanting people to engage in illegal activity outside of his home. I totally understand where he's coming from. But he's going above and beyond when he posts these videos on YouTube, when he shares these videos with news organizations so they can share it with the world. I get that these people do not have an expectation of privacy, but at the same time, you should try to solve the issue, not gratuitously go after them in this way of posting stuff online.
It's messed up and it's creepy, and I bet Marty gets his rocks off a little bit.
I was gonna say, what came to my mind when hearing about this was that it's like, yeah, Marty, we get it. I feel you, dude. I understand, but you're making it weird. Like, you're really making it weird, Marty, and that's the issue. Dude. Like, hey, I wouldn't want some people boning in my backyard either. But
I personally don't care. I don't know why it's such a big deal, but whatever. I mean, if they want to bone, they want to bone. There's like a pregnant lady there. She's having sex. It's fun. It's great for her.
So my best friend, she lives in an apartment complex, and like her kitchen window faces the bedroom window of a neighbor, and the neighbors, for some reason or another, like to have sex with the curtains open and you can see everything.
Am I her neighbor?
No. Oh my God. And so she told me that she's like amused by it, and she and her boyfriend sometimes like to watch, right? Again.
Oh, like popcorn watch, or are they getting naked as well when they're watching and they're like,
is this a sex event? Is what I think he's asking.
It's a sex event.
It's like a four-way with a wall between them.
Yeah, and then sometimes when you're living in an apartment complex, oh my God, sometimes when you're having a sex event, or someone else is having a sex event.
Sex event.
I feel like people are purposely loud because they want other neighbors to
know
hear
like how much fun they're having.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, how much fun is their event as opposed to the other event. So it's like, I bet you were sad you didn't get invited to this event.
Yeah.
Because this event is really fun.
Yeah.
We're cheering at our event. Yeah. And your event seems a little sad. Maybe you haven't had an event in a while,
Maybe we need a therapist to help you with your
having to throw an event. It's a lot to plan.
Yeah, exactly. You need an event planner.
Lots of things came out today.
Nailed it, Anna. Yes.
All right. Let's talk about concussions now. Really good transition.
Super. Which is what sometimes you get them after.
What a
sex
segue.
Event.
Yes. All right. The New York Times recently published a new expose on the NFL and some of their ties to the tobacco industry, especially when it comes to the issue of concussions and the way the NFL studied concussions, worked with lawyers and lobbyists when it comes to these concussions, and the way that they put out information about them. Now, the NFL didn't like the report, of course, because it makes them look really bad. So they wrote to the New York Times and wanted a retraction. But the New York Times was not about to have it. Now, let me give you a little more context about their story. What the New York Times found was while the NFL was studying concussions, there were a number of professional athletes that were retiring early because they were really concerned about their mental health. Well, at that time, the NFL releases this study talking about how, no, there's no long-term damage. Everyone needs to calm down. But their studies were very flawed. In fact, they found that about 100 diagnosed concussions were omitted from these studies, which is, of course, disastrous. You can't have that. And Steve Young and Troy Aikman were among the professional athletes that were not included in the studies. So obviously there are some flaws there, and the New York Times wrote about it. Then they found that the NFL worked with the same types of lawyers and professionals that helped protect the tobacco industry when the tobacco industry was pretending as though smoking didn't lead to any long-term health consequences. Now, after that report came out, the NFL was pissed. This week, NFL lawyers sent a letter to the New York Times demanding that the Times' recent investigation into the league's bogus concussion studies be retracted. Now, the New York Times responded back with the following. As you know, the Times has a policy of correcting factual errors as promptly as possible. I have reviewed your letter with our editors and reporters, and nowhere does your letter identify any factual error that we have made in our reporting on the ties between the NFL and the tobacco industry. The crux of the letter is the NFL's complaint that the connections identified by the article between the NFL and the tobacco industry were not meaningful. Obviously, that is an opinion, not a fact. Look, I've criticized the New York Times in the past for certain articles, especially during the time of the Iraq War when we decided to invade, right? But this is a perfect example of the New York Times standing up to a huge organization.
A huge organization that's historically had its way when it comes to beating even another massive industry like Hollywood when the movie Concussion. You remember that?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. I'm just glad that the New York Times has no vested interest in airing NFL stories, because if that were the case and they were making some substantial advertising revenue from that, you know how quickly they would have retracted everything and it would have been like, everything's good, concussions don't exist. I swear to God.
Well, maybe there wouldn't even be the need for a retraction. Maybe
they would have never aired, yes.
Yeah, they maybe would never have written the story in the first place. So
well, coming at this as a comedian, it's just some really good comic writing, I think. It's snarky, hits everything, but it's informative. I really enjoyed it, and it's so rare that you get to see this in journalism, unfortunately, when you have, again, like what Hassan was saying, standing up to a major corporation. That's awesome.
Yep.
And it kind of made me a little bit sad, to be honest, because you just don't see it that often anymore, where someone can kind of nut up and do it, and in such a...
Nut up.
Nut up. I haven't heard that expression
Nut up
before.
Or shut up, NFL.
This is when I'm going to remind everyone that I am from Belgium, and I think I misused that expression.
Nut up.
Damn it. The nutting up?
That sounds like a sex event.
I know. Oh, God. Let's not bring it back to sex events. You guys are dirty.
Hey, so boy, did I think it sure was swell. Give him top marks.
Yes.
It's just like they hid evidence. They did what NFL does, and they used the same lobbyists and consultants. And it's so foolish on the NFL's part to go out and make this a bigger deal than it actually is.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to bury it. Of course, the New York Times is going to respond like, "No, suck it. That's an opinion, not a fact." And then also, here are the facts that we're not going to retract because they're fucking facts.
Look, and also, there of course was a huge lawsuit against the NFL for not disclosing the impact of these concussions and all these, head injuries. And as a result, they agreed to settle with former players for $765 million, which sounds like a lot of money, but once you divvy it up among all the players that were impacted by this, it wasn't much. And think about the number of players who literally killed themselves because of the head injuries that they sustained from playing the game.
You know why the amount wasn't that big? Because they used the awesome lawyer teams that Philip Morris, the same tobacco industry that the NFL apparently called odious, which I do not know what that word means, but it sounds like something mean.
It's a negative.
It sounds negative.
Yes.
But the same industry they called odious, they happen to also use that awesome defense team to make sure that settlement was as low as possible.
Yes.
It's messed up.
It is messed up, but that's the way powerful organizations and corporations work in the United States. They have a lot of sway. They have endless resources to hire the best lawyers and defend themselves, and that's exactly what happened here. And look, There's a lot of talk about whether or not, we should ban football. And I don't think that things necessarily need to go from one extreme to another. I think what's important is transparency and giving people, adults, all the information they need to make an educated decision. And unfortunately, the NFL didn't give their athletes the ability to make those educated decisions.
They shouldn't. The NFL, don't worry, man. There are still going to be plenty of adults that force their children into playing football for centuries to come, because there will be plenty of Americans that continue to watch your game.
Yeah, and look, I don't even necessarily think it's adults forcing their kids. A lot of kids grow up wanting to play, and they want that opportunity. And that's fine, but again, there needs to be transparency. People need to know what they're getting themselves into. MMA is another example. MMA fighters get hit in the head all the time. Boxing is another example.
Less concussions, though.
Yeah, it's just less concussions, but still, there are still instances of it. Do we ban everything? I don't necessarily think we need to do it. Just be transparent and open about what the risks are, because there are risks in everything that we do, including driving cars. So are we going to ban driving? No, you just have to be educated about what you're doing.
America.
Yes. All right. Let's do one more story. We have time.
Yay.
Oh, this is the leg one?
Yes.
This is awesome.
Football.
Young people in China continue with a pattern of unhealthy messages when it comes to body images. But who am I to complain? The U.S. does the same thing. Now, the recent trend coming out of China involves young women using iPhones to measure the meatiness or lack thereof of their thighs, and they're trying to prove a point about how thin they are. It's disastrous. So let's show you examples. So the whole point is to kind of use the iPhone to show that their thighs are not thick or they're skinny, whatever it is. Who cares? It's
ironic, positive, negative shirt.
Yeah, it is ironic. Okay, the point I want to make about this is, we get it. It's unhealthy, and I hate it. I hate that it sends that negative body image message out to young people. But at the same time, it's kind of incredible just how much, body preferences differ from one country to another. Because here in the United States, it's all about, like, the thick, muscular thighs with a huge butt, right?
Kim Kardashian.
Curves are what Americans respond to.
Yes.
And knobby knees or whatever. A lot of these pictures, I just don't get. It's like I don't really know what I'm seeing here. But apparently that is the standard.
Yeah.
So I always feel weird about shaming someone to try and attain a specific beauty standard. I don't want to do that, but I can say that to me, it's not super appealing.
Or maybe you're just saying that because there's no way in hell an iPhone's going to fit on them knees.
Dude, there's literally no way in hell and I'm proud of that.
iPad knees.
Yeah. No, it's more like that's like a
MacBook Pro
MacBook Pro. No, let's go even bigger. That's like my TV. I'm just saying that there are different beauty standards, and this isn't necessarily one that I get, but, if that's something that appeals to them, cool, as long as you do it in a healthy way. It's just strange.
I love how Chinese this trend is, though, because not only is it have a lot of messages about, body dysmorphia or, like, unrealistic body goals, but it also has an iPhone 6 in it. So it has that hint of, like, super capitalist, consumerist mentality that Chinese people have, where, and I'm generalizing, but it's not racist because, they have a consumer culture in China now.
We have a consumer culture in the U.S. too.
Exactly,
yeah.
But don't you think it's kind of funny that it's like also an iPhone 6 needs? Like, if you have Android needs, then you're lower class, and you don't want to.
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, that's immediately. As soon as I saw that, I was like, can it be an iPhone 6s Plus, like, or is it just iPhone 6? Like, what are the boundaries here?
I'm tired of body image stories. I'm exhausted from them. They frustrate me. I find them super annoying, and I'm so happy that I'm not a teenager or in my early 20s anymore, because
must be nice.
I remember being in my early 20s and I would see something like this and I'd be like, oh my God, I gotta just see it. And now I'm like, I don't give a fuck, dude.
So you didn't put I literally, my one leg is still thicker than an iPhone 6 Plus. I would not be a part of this trend, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But look, I think in a weird way, we kind of deserve this because it's just something that we want. Like humans, I'm saying, as humans, this keeps coming back, and this keeps coming back into our culture because we keep creating new ways at looking at people's bodies and changing the expectation. And I think it's just the norm. There's just no other way to
do
it.
But
and
I
social
agree
media
with
is
Anna
just
that
a
it's
tool
exhausting.
that we're using.
It is exhausting.
Because we should know by now that everyone has a different body type. And
I know, but I'm just saying you can't curb it though.
Exactly right.
I'm saying like you can't put a stop to it. Is what I'm saying.
Right. I mean, I'm not saying that like this is where it stops. Like we've had enough. I'm just saying that it's exhausting because now with access to the internet from these wonderful iPhones, we can see that people all over the world have different body types, and that's awesome and great. You do you, and trying to do these little challenges. You have like the underboob challenge and like the what can fit in my bra challenge. And
the collarbone. There was a collarbone one where you put quarters.
So stupid. It's so stupid.
I think it's funny. It's
because
like
none of it's going to make anyone feel better.
Right.
If you're having to do a
unless
challenge,
you have
if you
dope ass skinny knees.
And by the way,
if you have to do a challenge.
Hold on. Another thing about all these challenges is it makes the assumption that everyone prefers the exact same body type. People prefer different body types. I've come across so many men who like super slender women, men who like really athletic women, men who like super curvaceous women. Or, and by the way, I mean, you are who you are. Be healthy. Make sure that you're doing what needs to be done to stay healthy. Like, there's no emphasis on that. The emphasis is, oh my God, like, does my iPhone, like, go across my knees? Because if it doesn't, I'm totally
offended. Is that your
offended.
definition of a Chinese
No,
teenager?
it's not.
And Anna, I would say that if you're participating in a beauty challenge to challenge yourself to see if you can conform to these standards, the chances are you're probably not happy with the image already. You kind of know the end result of that challenge is like, am I good enough? And
well,
I hate
it's a chicken
people
or the
having
egg situation, though,
have
because
to qualify their own beauty.
Are they unhappy because of all these challenges or because of the depictions
Well, I'm not
of
saying
unrealistic
they're
bodies
like
in
unhappy.
media?
I'm just saying
or
it's
are
pointless.
are they becoming unhappy because of that? Or are they unhappy to begin with, and they create these images?
Here's what I'll say.
Cares?
I don't think it adds anything.
Or not? I think this is stupid. And
it's
so
definitely stupid,
focus on
but
being
funny.
a healthy individual, both mentally and physically. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to be a certain body weight or whatever, and move on with your life. And also, for all the girls who are worried about this in their teens and early 20s, it gets better as you get closer to 30 because you care less and you don't give a fuck.
Grace.
Good.
It's fucking awesome.
Yeah.
Anyway,
make sure you noted all those things.
Just going to write that down.
Don't worry about it,
Thank
okay?
you. No, I appreciate
It's going to be
that.
all right.
All right, guys, we do have a post-game show for our members, so if you're a member, stick around. We'll be back in just a few minutes with our live post-game show. For everyone else, you should be a member. Go to tytnetwork.com/join. We love you. We'll see you tomorrow.
I'm ready. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.